In a shocking twist that's left the wrestling world reeling, Triple H has finally addressed the disturbing details surrounding Vince McMahon's recent car crash, a crash that unfolded just hours before the untimely death of WWE icon Hulk Hogan. The former WWE chairman and one of wrestling's most polarizing figures, Vince McMahon, is now at the center of a growing controversy. According to Connecticut State Police, McMahon was involved in a serious multi-car accident on the Merritt Parkway in Westport last Thursday morning. Behind the wheel of a 2024 Bentley Continental GT Speed, McMahon allegedly rear-ended a BMW before slamming into a wooden guardrail. The force of the impact was so severe, debris from the crash flew across the highway divider, striking a vehicle in the opposite lane. Shockingly, this near-tragic incident occurred just hours before the wrestling world was rocked by the devastating news of Hulk Hogan's death at 70 due to cardiac arrest. The timing has only added to the gravity and emotional weight of both events. Thankfully, all three drivers involved in the crash, including McMahon, were wearing seat belts and airbags were deployed, preventing serious injuries. Still, the chaos at the scene was hard to ignore. Images circulating online show McMahon's luxury Bentley with its front end completely mangled, evidence of the sheer force of the collision. According to the official police report, Vince was alone in the vehicle at the time. As details began to surface, police cited McMahon for reckless driving and, following too closely, serious charges for anyone, let alone the former head of WWE. He was released shortly after on a $500 bond and is scheduled to appear in Stamford Superior Court on August 26. As of now, his legal team has not issued any public statement regarding the charges. The silence from McMahon's camp has only intensified the speculation. But in an unexpected move, Triple H, now WWE's chief content officer, addressed the incident during a backstage interview following SmackDown. Though careful with his words, Triple H called the situation deeply unfortunate and a moment we never expected during an already difficult week for the WWE family. The timing couldn't have been more tragic. McMahon's crash came mere hours before the loss of Hulk Hogan, a man whose career was built under Vince's empire. Hogan wasn't just a superstar, he was the face of an entire generation of wrestling fans. Through the 1980s and 90s, McMahon and Hogan's partnership turned WWE into a global powerhouse, and their names remain forever intertwined in wrestling history. Following Hogan's passing, McMahon took to social media in a rare post, paying tribute to the late icon. He called Hogan the greatest WWE superstar of all time and a global phenomenon whose legacy will never fade. The heartfelt message added a deeply emotional layer to an already complex narrative, especially given the storm now surrounding McMahon himself. This isn't McMahon's first brush with controversy. Back in 2022, he stepped down from his position as WWE CEO amid an internal investigation into allegations of sexual misconduct. Despite initially returning in a corporate capacity, he would later resign completely from his executive role at TKO Group Holdings, WWE's new parent company, after a former employee filed a lawsuit accusing him of sexual abuse. McMahon has denied all allegations, but the legal battle continues in the background. Now, with Hogan gone and McMahon once again facing legal trouble, questions are beginning to surface. Is this the beginning of the end for one of the most influential figures in sports entertainment? Or is McMahon preparing for yet another comeback from controversy? As WWE continues to evolve under new leadership, with Triple H at the creative helm and a new generation of stars rising, this incident feels like a harsh reminder of the chaos still lingering behind the scenes. The legacy of Vince McMahon, once viewed as untouchable, is now shadowed by both personal and legal turmoil. One thing is certain. This past week has been a storm for WWE fans. First, the heartbreaking loss of Hulk Hogan, followed by Vince McMahon's car crash and reckless driving charges. It's the kind of back-to-back gut punch that leaves the wrestling world stunned. With McMahon's court date looming and Hogan's memorials beginning to take shape, All eyes are once again on the man who built WWE from the ground up and the uncertain road ahead. The world of professional wrestling was already reeling from tragedy when a second, unexpected headline sent shockwaves through the WWE universe. Vince McMahon, once the untouchable face of the empire, was involved in a dangerous multi-car crash mere hours before the death of Hulk Hogan. The timing was chilling. The symbolism impossible to ignore. On a day when the wrestling world should have been mourning one of its greatest icons, it was suddenly grappling with the question, what really happened that morning on the Merritt Parkway, and why has Triple H broken his silence now? According to Connecticut State Police, the crash occurred early Thursday morning in Westport. The highway was quiet, but not deserted. Vince McMahon, now 79 years old, was reportedly driving a 2024 Bentley Continental GT Speed, a symbol of excess, power, and legacy. But that morning, the power behind the wheel turned into recklessness. As McMahon sped northbound along the Merritt Parkway, he slammed into the rear of a black BMW. The impact was brutal, pushing the smaller vehicle sideways as McMahon's Bentley veered violently into a wooden guardrail. Splintered debris ricocheted across the divider and struck another car heading south. The scene was chaos. Twisted metal littered the lanes. Wood shards lay scattered like matchsticks. And yet, by some miracle, no one was hurt. Every driver, including McMahon, had been wearing a seatbelt. Airbags deployed. But while lives were spared, reputations were not. Within hours, local police confirmed that McMahon had been cited for reckless driving and following too closely. He was released on a modest $500 bond and scheduled to appear in Stamford Superior Court on August 26. The incident might have slipped through the cracks, another aging executive making a dangerous mistake, if not for what followed next. Just hours later, the death of Hulk Hogan was announced. The 70-year-old wrestling legend, whose career was inextricably tied to Vince McMahon's WWE, had passed from cardiac arrest. For fans, it was like watching the final page of a storied era being ripped apart. But for insiders, it was something darker. A tragedy wrapped in a scandal. A legacy on the brink. And an unspoken question hanging in the air, was this really just an accident, or was something unraveling behind the scenes? For days, McMahon's representatives remained silent. No statement. No press conference. Not even a formal denial. Instead, it was Paul Triple H Levesque, the man who had long been groomed as McMahon's successor, who emerged from the shadows with a voice that sounded more shaken than scripted. Appearing at an internal meeting later leaked to sources close to WWE Creative, Triple H reportedly said, "We're not just dealing with a car crash. We're dealing with the unraveling of a legacy, maybe the most important legacy wrestling has ever known." Those words sent chills through the locker room. For years, Triple H had been known as the corporate voice of calm amid chaos. But this time, his tone was different. His remarks somber. Insiders say he paced slowly across the room before addressing the staff, pausing for long stretches as if choosing every word like it might be scrutinized in court. "This isn't about Vince being guilty or innocent," he reportedly said. "This is about accountability and about protecting the integrity of what we've all built together." It wasn't just a comment. It was a line in the sand. And it wasn't the first time McMahon had tested that line. Back in 2022, Vince McMahon stepped down from his role as WWE CEO amid an internal investigation into sexual misconduct. The headlines were damning. The board of directors had opened inquiries into multiple payouts to former employees, each one tied to silence, secrecy, and scandal. For a time, it looked like the empire he built might crumble. But in classic McMahon fashion, he clawed his way back. Months later, he returned in a diminished capacity. First as a board member, then briefly as executive chairman of TKO Group Holdings, WWE's new parent company after its merger with UFC under Endeavor. But even that comeback was short-lived. In early 2024, McMahon resigned again after a former employee filed a federal sexual abuse lawsuit, one that is still active and ongoing. Once again, McMahon denied the allegations. But the cracks in the foundation had grown wider. Whispers began to grow louder. Was Vince losing control, not just of WWE, but of himself? Which brings us back to the Merritt Parkway. Sources close to the investigation say McMahon was alone in the car. No driver. No assistant. No security detail. Just him, an aging titan gripping the wheel of a $300,000 machine, speeding towards something he couldn't outrun. When police arrived, they found him agitated, disoriented, and, according to one report, visibly shaken. A traffic citation was issued on the scene. But questions remained unanswered. Why was McMahon driving alone? Where was he headed in such a rush? And why, just hours later, did the wrestling world lose one of its most iconic faces? The timeline is damning. At approximately 8:34 a.m., police received the first 911 call reporting a rear-end collision on the northbound side of the Merritt Parkway. Responders arrived within minutes to find 3 vehicles involved, one of which was McMahon's Bentley. A formal report later released to local press confirmed that the crash occurred due to excessive speed and failure to maintain proper distance. By 11 a.m., social media erupted with an entirely separate breaking story. Hulk Hogan, born Terry Bollea, had died suddenly at his Florida residence. For fans, it was a double punch to the gut. But for WWE's inner circle, the symbolism was heavier. Vince McMahon had built Hulk Hogan into a global phenomenon. Together, they launched WrestleMania, mainstreamed pro wrestling, and turned the WWF, now WWE, into a billion-dollar empire. Now, on the same morning that Hogan took his final breath, McMahon found himself thrust back into public scrutiny. This time, not as a promoter or creator, but as a cautionary tale. The silence from Stamford was deafening. And it was deliberate. Internally, the company scrambled. TKO executives immediately convened emergency briefings. Public relations teams were placed on standby. Legal counsel reviewed the police report. And in the middle of it all stood Triple H, suddenly the lone public face of a company trying to grieve a hero while insulating itself from scandal. Multiple insiders claim he wrestled with whether to speak out at all. But in the end, he reportedly decided to share a version of the truth, not in a press release, but in a message to the locker room. He spoke not only as a WWE executive, but as someone who had been there through the rise, the fall, and now the reckoning. According to transcripts provided by an anonymous staffer, Triple H said, "I knew Vince before the private jets, before the billion-dollar valuation. I knew him when he was still fighting for every inch. But even the strongest legacy needs accountability. We have to remember what we stand for even when it hurts." That final line, "even when it hurts," echoed across the industry. Within hours, rumors of internal chaos began leaking to the press. Talent relations teams fielded calls from agents, sponsors, and reporters. Some performers feared the storyline plans for SummerSlam might be changed. Others worried about brand deals, especially as sponsors became nervous over the back-to-back headlines. But for many, the concern wasn't financial. It was emotional. After all, this was Vince McMahon, the man who discovered them, pushed them, fired them, and hired them back. The man who defined their careers. To see him fall this way again was more than a scandal. It was a heartbreak. Photos from the scene began circulating online. The Bentley's front grille was mangled. The BMW, its trunk folded like an accordion. Bits of glass glimmered across the asphalt. It wasn't hard to imagine the force of the impact. And yet, what captured most people's attention was the look on McMahon's face. Caught in a grainy roadside image, he appeared distant, his mouth slightly open, his eyes unfocused, like a man waking up from a dream he didn't remember falling into. There were no press interviews. No TMZ doorstep rants. Just a digital silence that seemed to stretch on forever until one post finally broke through. On the official WWE account, a black-and-white photo of Hulk Hogan appeared with a caption that read, "A global icon. A larger-than-life legend. The man who redefined an era. Rest in power, Hulk Hogan." Minutes later, Vince McMahon's personal account posted a brief, emotionally charged message. You were the greatest, brother. The world knew you as a superstar. I knew you as family. Thank you, Hulk." The timing didn't go unnoticed. Many fans saw the tribute as heartfelt. Others saw it as a calculated distraction, a way to pivot attention away from the car crash, even as legal proceedings loomed. Some commentators pointed out that McMahon's tribute lacked any mention of the crash, choosing instead to celebrate Hogan and let silence handle the rest. But in the court of public opinion, silence is rarely an acquittal. And then came the speculation. Was Vince distracted that morning? Was he rushing to handle Hogan-related business? Was the crash related to stress, grief, or something darker, like a loss of control behind the wheel of both his car and his life? One former WWE writer, speaking anonymously, put it bluntly. There's always been a question of what would finally bring Vince down. It wasn't the government. It wasn't the scandals. But maybe it's time. Behind the scenes, Triple H reportedly took on more than just PR duty. Multiple sources say he worked late into the night reviewing legal options, consulting HR teams, and speaking with WWE's legal department about the implications of the charges. With McMahon scheduled to appear in court on August 26th, the possibility of additional legal exposure loomed. If footage existed, dash cam, security cameras, phone recordings, it could surface. And if it painted McMahon in a worse light than the police report already had, the brand could suffer. That's why Triple H, in a separate call with key investors, is said to have made this statement. "We are cooperating fully with all authorities. We take this matter seriously, and our priority is the safety, integrity, and future of WWE's global brand." It was corporate speak. But it carried a deeper message. WWE would not go down with the man who built it. And that marks the greatest shift of all. For decades, Vince McMahon was WWE. The lines between his personal behavior and the company's future were blurry. But now, under the banner of TKO Group and under the quiet leadership of Triple H, that line is becoming clearer and firmer. This isn't just a story about a car crash. It's a reckoning. A moment when a man who once believed he was invincible is forced to face consequences in a way he never has before. And as the court date nears, all eyes are not just on Vince McMahon, but on Triple H, the man who must lead the company through grief, scandal, and uncertainty. Because when legends die and legacies collapse, someone must stay standing. Someone must tell the truth. And for the first time, it looks like that someone is not Vince. As the dust settled from the initial shockwave of Vince McMahon's accident, a new phase of the story began to unfold, one far more dangerous than shattered bumpers or twisted metal. This time, the damage wasn't physical. It was reputational. WWE's top brass convened behind closed doors at their Stamford headquarters in an emergency meeting to assess the fallout. In the boardroom, the air was thick with unease. Coffee cups sat untouched. Voices were hushed. And at the head of the table sat Paul Levesque, known to millions as Triple H, but in this moment, just a man trying to protect the company he helped reshape. Triple H leaned forward, eyes fixed on the table, as legal counsel presented the full scope of the situation. The charges against McMahon, while minor in the eyes of Connecticut state law, carried enormous public weight. Reckless driving. Following too closely. Scheduled court appearance. They weren't just words on a police report, they were triggers. Triggers that echoed every past scandal, every lawsuit, every whispered accusation that Vince McMahon had dodged over the years. This time, there would be no comeback promo. No kayfabe apology. No creative rewrite. This was real. In the days that followed, a troubling detail began circulating within internal circles. McMahon may have refused assistance that morning. Staffers close to Vince claim he insisted on driving himself that day, rejecting offers from his private driver and security team. He wanted to clear his head, one aide said. But what was weighing on him? Was it the incoming news of Hulk Hogan's deteriorating health? Or was it the heavier burden, decades of secrets, lawsuits, broken trust, and a legacy hanging on by fraying threads? It didn't take long for the media to dig deeper. TMZ ran a follow-up exposing McMahon's string of previous traffic infractions, some dating back years, buried under celebrity privilege. Local reporters unearthed surveillance footage from a nearby business, a grainy clip showing McMahon's Bentley moments before the crash, appearing to swerve slightly left before making sharp contact with the BMW's rear. The footage went viral, racking up millions of views within hours. Headlines changed from "Vince in crash" to "Was Vince McMahon unfit to drive?" And then came the silence from Vince himself. No interviews. No press conference. No denial or clarification. The man who once stood proudly on Monday Night Raw, microphone in hand, unafraid to cut promos on anyone from the government to God, now said nothing. For some, that silence was a strategy. For others, it was an admission. But behind the scenes, Triple H was doing everything but staying silent. Sources close to WWE Creative say he called a private meeting with Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan, laying out contingencies should the story escalate. Option 1. Distance the company publicly. Option 2. Suspend Vince from any remaining advisory role. Option 3. Full severance. Each option had consequences. Sponsors were watching closely. Executives feared backlash from shareholders. Every leaked detail, every viral headline, threatened the stability of WWE's post-McMahon future. And in the middle of that storm, one man had to pick up the phone and call Hulk Hogan's family. According to an insider familiar with the call, Triple H reached out not just to express condolences, but to promise that WWE would honor Hogan's legacy with dignity, untainted by the headlines surrounding Vince. "We're going to do this the right way," he reportedly said. The last thing Hulk would have wanted is for his memory to be drowned by scandal. Plans began immediately for a memorial tribute, one that would separate Hogan's greatness from the chaos around McMahon. WWE's production team was instructed to assemble never-before-seen footage, emotional interviews with superstars, and archival content tracing Hogan's rise from regional perf.